When it comes to the most important and highly revered figures all across music history, there may be no other with a stature quite like Woody Guthrie. And yet most people fail to properly understand why both his music and his sheer presence were so vital to the progression of all forms of modern music. Having written countless songs that have become standards all across the world, as well as famously having the words "This machine kills fascists" written on his guitar, from folk to punk to everything in between, it's within the music of Woody Guthrie where you find the true history of all forms of modern music. Born Woodrow Wilson Guthrie on July 14, 1912 in Oklahoma, his father was heavily involved in local politics, though it was later revealed that his father was in fact a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and many early experiences of this duality can be found in the lyrics of Woody Guthrie. In his early years, Woody's sister was killed in a fire where his father was also seriously injured, and then his mother was institutionalized due to suffering from what would later be called Huntington's disease. Due to these realities and his father moving to Texas to try and earn money to pay off debts, Woody was left virtually alone at the age of 14. Over the next few years, he learned how to play guitar and harmonica, and by 19, he was living in Texas with his wife Mary, with whom he would later have 3 children. In the early 1930s, Guthrie left his family in Texas to follow the thousands of Oklahoma residents who were moving to California in hopes of new work. The songs he was writing quickly shifted to the plight of the working man, and many of these remain classics to this day. At the end of the 1930s, Woody Guthrie began to gain a large amount of notoriety due to the politically charged nature of his lyrics, and this led to the beginning of his longtime friendship and collaboration with newsman Ed Robin. It was due to this relationship that Guthrie was introduced to large groups of socialists, communists, and other far-left parties, and while many of his songs may have spoken to the values of those sorts of groups, he himself was never a member. In the early 1940s, Guthrie moved to New York City, and it was here where he recorded his legendary Dust Bowl ballad sessions, as well as hours of recordings and interviews with the iconic Alan Lomax. However, it was in February of 1940 when Guthrie penned what may be his most famous and also most misunderstood song, "This Land Is Your Land." Though many see it as a celebratory or uniting song, the reality is that Guthrie wrote the song in response to Irving Berlin's "God Bless America," which he felt was far too complacent and unrealistic. Many of the song's verses were actually left off of the original recordings, but there's no question that the overtones speak to the working class and the idea that they need to remember that they are the foundation upon which our society has been built. Throughout the 1940s, Guthrie moved all over the country, penning a number of timeless songs, but as the decade began to close out, his health began to deteriorate. This led to his own passing from Huntington's disease in 1967, and strangely enough, in the few years leading up to his death, his music had found a great resurgence. From the defiant words he sang, to the actual style with which he presented himself, to the fact that he was never intimidated by a government or a label, it's very easy to make the case that Woody Guthrie was the first punk rocker, and few musicians epitomize the idea of rock and roll and the power and joy of music as much as he did throughout his entire career. So while many people might wish to write Woody Guthrie off as just some folk singer, once you delve into his music and you really listen to what he's saying, it's quite clear that he was decades ahead of his time in every sense of the word. Even as we near the 100th anniversary of his birth, there's no question that Guthrie's legacy is as strong and as important as ever. From Bruce Springsteen to Bob Dylan to Joe Strummer to Pete Seeger to almost any strong-minded writer of the past century, Woody Guthrie stands as the common source for inspiration. And there may be no other figure in the entire history of music as vitally important to the entire progression of music as the legendary Woody Guthrie.